The debt collector's plasma whip cracked against the alien woman's shoulder, sending her crashing into the market stall. Purple blood splattered across crystalline fruits as she tried to shield her child. A small, trembling creature with oversized eyes that reflected pure terror. 50,000 credits, the collector snarled, his cybernetic arm whirring as he raised the weapon again. Your husband's mining accident doesn't erase what he owed the Consortium. Queen Lysara watched from her observation deck high above the trading plaza, her fingers tight on the railing. The annual inspection of Colony 7 had revealed the usual corruption, but this was different. Below, hundreds of aliens and humans moved through the market, but none dared intervene. The Consortium's enforcers made sure of that. Captain Torres, her personal guard, shifted beside her. Your Majesty, perhaps we should, wait. Lysara's voice carried absolute authority. Something was happening in the crowd. A human stepped forward. Not a soldier or security officer. Just an ordinary man in maintenance coveralls, tool belt still hanging from his waist. His hands showed the calluses of honest work. His face bore the lines of someone who understood struggle. That's enough, he said simply. The debt collector laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the plaza walls. Walk away, human. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me. The man, Marcus something, Lysara remembered from the colony records, placed himself between the collector and the fallen woman. She works the hydroponics farms, feeds half this colony. Good person. Good doesn't pay debts. The whip hummed with deadly energy. Move or burn with her. Marcus didn't move. Instead, he did something that made Lysara grip the railing harder. He knelt beside the alien woman, helping her sit up while keeping his eyes on the collector. How much? He asked quietly. What? How much? The collector's expression shifted to predatory interest. 50,000, plus fees. 60 total. Lysara felt her breath catch. A maintenance worker's salary couldn't cover that amount in 5 years. Maybe 10. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, still supporting the injured woman. Her child pressed against her side, those huge eyes now fixed on the human who dared stand between them and death. I'll take it, Marcus said. The plaza fell silent, except for the hum of distant machinery. Even the collector seemed stunned. You'll what? The debt. Transfer it to me. Marcus helped the woman to her feet, his movements careful and gentle. Consortium law allows it, right? Debt assumption with witness testimony. Lysara found herself leaning forward. She'd studied Consortium regulations extensively during the peace negotiations. The human was correct, but the implications were staggering. You understand what you're saying? The collector's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Marcus. Debt bondage. 7 years minimum. Maybe longer if you miss payments. I understand. The alien woman, Kessa, Lysara recalled, grabbed Marcus's arm with desperate strength. No, you don't know what this means. They'll work you to death. Marcus looked down at her, then at the child still clinging to its mother. Something passed across his face, not heroism or grand gesture, but simple recognition of necessity. Better than watching them work you to death. Torres moved beside Lysara. Your Majesty, if we intervened, we can't. The words tasted bitter, not without violating the Accords. Direct interference in Consortium debt collection could restart the war. Below, the collector was already pulling out his scanner, sensing an opportunity. Full debt transfer requires blood binding. Neuralink. Once it's done, there's no backing out. I know. The device in the collector's hand looked like a medical scanner crossed with a weapon, which Lysara realized it essentially was. The neural binding process would create an unbreakable link between Marcus and the Consortium's enforcement systems. They would know his location, his biometrics, his compliance status, every second of every day. Last chance to walk away, the collector said with obvious disappointment. Marcus extended his hand toward the scanner. Do it. The binding only took seconds. Blue light played across Marcus's palm as microscopic implants burrowed into his nervous system. His jaw tightened, but he didn't cry out. When it was over, the scanner displayed his new status in harsh red letters. Bonded. 7 years. Mining division. The collector smiled with genuine pleasure now. Report to Station Omega tomorrow. 600 hours. Don't be late. Every minute costs you. He turned and walked away, his job complete. The crowd began to disperse, returning to their business as if nothing had happened. But the alien woman remained, staring at Marcus with an expression Lysara had never seen before. Why? Kessa whispered. Marcus was already walking away, hands in his pockets like he'd just helped someone carry groceries. Seemed like the right thing. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only questions and a small alien child who would grow up free. Lysara straightened slowly, her mind racing. In 30 years of ruling humanity's colonies, she had never witnessed anything quite like this. The casual self-sacrifice. The complete lack of theatrics, Your Majesty, Torres prompted. Prepare my shuttle, she said quietly. I need to have a conversation with a maintenance worker. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she had just witnessed and what it might mean for humanity's future among the stars. Marcus Chen worked the third shift in Hydroponics Bay 7, the colony's largest food production facility. When Lysara arrived unannounced at 3 a.m, she found him alone among the growing towers, checking nutrient levels with methodical precision. He looked up as she entered, accompanied only by Torres. No fanfare, no protocol announcement. Just a queen and her guard walking into a garden that fed thousands. Your Majesty. Marcus set down his scanner, wiping his hands on his coveralls. Wasn't expecting company. I imagine not. Lysara moved between the growing towers, breathing in the rich scent of earth and green things. We need to talk. About today? About tomorrow. She stopped beside a tower of climbing beans, their leaves reaching toward the artificial sun. You report to Station Omega in 18 hours. Marcus's expression didn't change. That's the plan. Station Omega is a death sentence, Torres said bluntly. Mining asteroids in the outer belt, radiation exposure, equipment failures. The average bonded worker lasts 3 years. Then, I'll have to be above average. Lysara studied him carefully. No bravado. No hidden agenda she could detect. Just acceptance of consequences for a choice already made. Why did you do it? Marcus resumed his work, adjusting flow rates and checking root systems. You saw her kid. What else was I supposed to do? Walk away? Like everyone else did. Everyone else has families to worry about, people depending on them. He moved to the next tower, his movements efficient and practiced. I've got nobody. Makes the choice easier. Lysara felt something twist in her chest. You have a life. A future. Had a life. Made my choice. Marcus paused, looking directly at her. Your Majesty, with respect, why are you here? You can't change what happened. Consortium law is consortium law. He was right, of course. The debt binding was legally unbreakable under the accords that ended the human Consortium War. Any attempted interference could be interpreted as an act of aggression, potentially restarting a conflict that had cost billions of lives. But there were other ways to help. What if I offered you a position? She said carefully. Royal service. The pay scale might make your debt payments more manageable. Marcus actually smiled at that. Nice try, but bonded workers can't change employers without consortium approval. They'd never agree to it. Torres stepped forward. There are precedents. Royal favor has weight even in consortium space. At what cost? Marcus's expression grew serious. Your Majesty, I appreciate the thought, but you didn't build peace by picking fights with debt collectors. Don't risk that for me. Lysara found herself impressed despite the situation. Here was a man facing 7 years of brutal servitude, possibly death, and his concern was for diplomatic stability. Tell me about Kessa, she said instead. Marcus brightened slightly. Good worker. Lost her husband in a mine collapse 6 months ago, trying to raise her daughter alone. The consortium claimed he had gambling debts, but I never saw him do anything but work and go home to his family. You think the debt was fabricated? I think the consortium needed workers, and dead miners don't pay debts. Easier to transfer the obligation to the widow. That matched intelligence reports Lysara had been receiving about Consortium practices in the outer colonies, manufactured debts, forced labor, a system designed to trap the desperate and vulnerable. "There might be another way," she said slowly. Marcus and Torres both looked at her. "The debt binding is unbreakable, yes, but it doesn't specify where the work must be performed, only that it must be performed for the Consortium's benefit." "What are you thinking?" Torres asked. "Colony 7 produces 40% of the region's food supply, critical infrastructure. If a bonded worker were assigned here instead of the mining stations," she let the implication hang. Marcus shook his head. "They'd never agree. Mining pays better than farming, unless the farming position came with certain enhancements. Royal dietary consultant, perhaps. Security clearance required. Hazard pay authorized for protection of critical resources." Torres caught on first. "Hazard pay that happens to match mining quotas. The Consortium gets their money," Lysara continued. "The worker stays alive. Everyone wins. Except I'd still be bonded," Marcus pointed out. 7 years of servitude. 7 years of useful work instead of death in the asteroids. Lysara moved closer. "And 7 years to find legal ways to challenge illegitimate debts." For the first time, Marcus hesitated. Hope was a dangerous thing when you'd already accepted the alternative. "Why would you do this for me?" Lysara considered her answer carefully. The truth was complex. Political calculations mixed with genuine admiration for his sacrifice. But there was something simpler underneath. "Because someone needs to," she said finally. "And because what you did today reminded me why we fought the war in the first place." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, standing among the green growing things he'd tended for 3 years. Finally he nodded. "All right. But if this backfires, it won't." Torres was already activating his comm unit, sending encrypted messages to Colonial administration. Within hours, paperwork would be filed, authorizations granted, and a new position created that existed solely to keep one decent man alive. As they prepared to leave, Marcus called out, "Your Majesty, what happens to Kessa now?" Lysara smiled. "Let me worry about that." Outside, she gave Torres additional instructions. Anonymous donations to cover immediate expenses. A job opening in colonial security that required someone with agricultural knowledge. Small interventions that wouldn't trigger Consortium attention, but would ensure a mother and daughter could build a new life. 6 hours later, the official response came through diplomatic channels. The Consortium accepted the position transfer with suspicious eagerness, probably sensing an opportunity to place an asset inside colonial operations. They had no idea they'd just agreed to keep alive the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, a human who chose to do the right thing. The media coverage started within hours. Not from any official sources. Royal protocol strictly forbade discussing ongoing diplomatic matters. But someone in the plaza had recorded everything, and the footage found its way to independent networks throughout human space. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Human bonded to save alien family. Maintenance worker accepts 7 years servitude, colonial hero, or dangerous precedent. Lysara watched the reports from her private office aboard the royal flagship, already 3 systems away from Colony 7. Public opinion was splitting along predictable lines. Military veterans and colonial workers praised Marcus's sacrifice. Business leaders worried about the economic implications. Politicians debated the diplomatic ramifications. She found she cared about none of it. What mattered was the message that had arrived from Kessa 2 hours ago. A simple thank you, accompanied by a photo of her daughter playing in a colonial security training facility while her mother filled out employment paperwork. "The Galactic Council has requested a formal statement," Torres reported, entering with a stack of diplomatic communiques. "They want clarification on humanity's position regarding debt bondage. Our position hasn't changed. We honor existing agreements while working toward reform through legal channels. The Consortium is less diplomatic. They're calling it a publicity stunt designed to undermine their authority." Lysara set down the photo. "Let 'em." Torres hesitated. "Ma'am, there's something else. Intelligence reports suggest other colonies are experiencing similar situations. Manufactured debts, forced bondage." If word of this spreads, more humans might make similar choices. Lysara turned to face him. Is that what worries you? The potential for widespread civil disobedience in Consortium space? Yes. The political ramifications? Captain, in your opinion, what separates us from our enemies? Taurus straightened. Our respect for individual freedom and dignity. Precisely. Which means when our people choose to exercise that freedom, even at personal cost, our job is to support them, not control them. She moved to the observation port, watching the stars wheel past. Somewhere behind them, Marcus Chen was beginning his 7 years of service. Somewhere ahead, other colonies faced similar crises. Draft new colonial guidelines, she said finally. Legal assistance funds for cases involving predatory lending. Expanded employment programs for vulnerable populations. And I want a full review of Consortium business practices in human space. That could take years. Then we'd better start now. Torres nodded and withdrew, leaving Lysara alone with her thoughts. The truth was, Marcus's choice had created more than a diplomatic headache. It had created an opportunity. For too long, humanity had accepted Consortium economic dominance as the price of peace. One man's willingness to sacrifice himself for a stranger had exposed the moral bankruptcy of that system. The question now was whether humanity would have the courage to follow his example. Her personal communicator chimed. A priority message from Colony 7. Request permission to establish debt intervention unit. Multiple volunteers ready for bonding transfer protocols if similar situations arise. Awaiting orders. Colonial Administrator Hayes Lysara stared at the message for a long moment. It was starting already. Marcus's example spreading like wildfire through the colonial territories. Ordinary people willing to take extraordinary risks for others they barely knew. She thought about the implications, the Consortium response, the potential for escalation. Then she thought about a small alien child who would grow up free because one human chose to do the right thing. Her response was brief. Permission granted. Full support authorized. Make sure they know what they're choosing. As the flagship jumped to hyperspace, carrying her toward the capital and the political storm that awaited, Lysara found herself smiling. The Consortium had built their power on the assumption that most beings were fundamentally selfish, that self-preservation would always triumph over moral principle. They were about to learn how wrong they were about humans. The parliamentary session was already in chaos when Lysara arrived. Representatives from 12 worlds shouted over each other while news feeds played the footage from Colony 7 on endless repeat. At the center of it all, Marcus Chen's calm voice declaring, "Seemed like the right thing," had become a rallying cry for both sides of the debate. Your Majesty, Prime Minister Reeves approached with barely contained frustration. We need your statement immediately. The Consortium ambassador is threatening to review the entire treaty structure. Let them review. Lysara took her place at the royal podium as the chamber slowly quieted. In fact, I encourage it. The silence that followed was profound. Behind her, Torres shifted slightly, the only sign of his surprise. Your Majesty, Representative Morrison from the industrial world stood. With respect, any disruption to the current accords could have devastating economic consequences. Could it? Lysara activated the chamber's main display, showing trade statistics compiled over the past 5 years. Our agricultural exports have increased 300%, manufacturing output up 150%, colonial population growing at unprecedented rates. Tell me, Representative Morrison, exactly what are we afraid of losing? Morrison hesitated. Economic stability, peaceful coexistence, built on the backs of bonded workers and manufactured debts. The data changed, showing Consortium business practices across human space. In the past year alone, over 4,000 humans have entered to debt bondage. Average survival rate in Consortium mining operations, 37%. Gasps echoed through the chamber. This intelligence had been classified until now. Representative Singh from the border colonies stood. Your Majesty, are you suggesting we reject the treaty structure entirely? I'm suggesting we demand better. Lysara moved from behind the podium, addressing the chamber directly. Yesterday, a maintenance worker on Colony 7 showed us what courage looks like. He didn't check polling numbers or convene committees or analyze economic impact reports. He saw injustice and chose to act. One man's heroism doesn't constitute foreign policy, Morrison protested. Doesn't it? The display changed again, showing messages flooding in from across human space. Volunteers registering for debt intervention units. Colonial administrators requesting legal assistance funds. A groundswell of ordinary people willing to stand up for others, because it seems to me that's exactly what it's become. Ambassador Chen, no relation to Marcus despite the shared name, rose from the diplomatic section. Your Majesty, the Consortium has already expressed willingness to discuss reforms through proper channels. This theatrical approach serves no constructive purpose. Lysara's smile was sharp. Then perhaps they should have discussed reforms before citizens felt compelled to take matters into their own hands. The truth was, she'd been planning this confrontation for months. The intelligence about Consortium practices had been building steadily, but public opinion hadn't been strong enough to support major policy changes. Marcus's sacrifice had provided the catalyst she needed. I'm announcing the formation of the Colonial Protection Initiative, she continued. Legal assistance for debt disputes, economic support for vulnerable populations, and yes, formal volunteer programs for debt intervention when local governments fail to protect their people. The chamber erupted. Shouts of approval from colonial representatives, mixed with protests from the industrial worlds. Through it all, Ambassador Chen's expression remained carefully neutral, but Lysara caught the slight tightening around his eyes. This is a declaration of economic war, Morrison declared. This is a declaration of principles, Lysara corrected. The same principles that founded our colonial expansion, that every human being deserves freedom and dignity, regardless of their economic circumstances. The Consortium will never accept. Lysara held up a hand, silencing the chamber. The Consortium will accept what we offer them, partnership based on mutual respect, or economic independence based on mutual separation, their choice. As the session dissolved into smaller groups arguing among themselves, Torres approached quietly. The Consortium ambassador has requested an immediate private meeting. I'm sure he has. Lysara watched the chaos she'd unleashed with satisfaction. Schedule it for tomorrow. Let them think about their options overnight. And if they choose separation? Lysara considered the question. Humanity's colonies were increasingly self-sufficient. Their populations growing, their economies maturing. The Consortium still held technological advantages, but the gap was narrowing every year. More importantly, they had something the Consortium lacked. The willingness to sacrifice for principle rather than profit. Then we'll discover how strong we've become. That evening, alone in her private chambers, Lysara composed a personal message to Marcus Chen, not a royal proclamation or diplomatic communication, but a simple note between humans. Thank you for reminding us who we are. She sent it through encrypted channels, knowing it would reach him in some hydroponic bay on Colony 7, still serving his 7-year bond, but now serving it with purpose and support. His response came 3 hours later, equally simple. Just did what needed doing. Heard about the initiative. Good work. Lysara found herself laughing despite the weight of the moment. Somewhere in the galaxy, a maintenance worker was offering casual approval of interstellar policy changes that would reshape humanity's future. It was, she realized, the most honest performance review she'd received in 30 years of leadership. The Consortium's decision came at dawn. Ambassador Chen delivered it personally. His expression carefully composed, but his hands showing the slight tremor of someone who'd spent the night in heated communications with his government. The Consortium Council has reviewed your proposal, he began formally. They're prepared to offer certain limited reforms in exchange for your government's commitment to existing treaty structures. Lysara gestured for him to continue, though she already knew where this was heading. Improved working conditions in mining operations. Expanded appeal processes for debt disputes, reduced bonding periods for first-time obligations. He paused. In exchange, humanity agrees to end the Colonial Protection Initiative and extradite the debt intervention volunteers for violation of Consortium labor law. Counter-proposal, Lysara said without hesitation. Complete elimination of debt bondage for basic necessities. Independent arbitration for all debt disputes. full political autonomy for human colonies in their internal affairs. She smiled pleasantly. In exchange, we won't encourage our colonies to declare independence and form their own economic alliance. The ambassador's careful composure cracked slightly. Your Majesty, you're talking about the complete restructuring of an economic system that has maintained stability for over 2 centuries. I'm talking about justice. The practical implications, Torres interrupted from his position by the door, are that humanity no longer needs the Consortium's protection or economic dominance. Our colonies are self-sufficient. Our population is growing. Our technology is advancing. He stepped forward slightly. What we won't accept any longer is our people being enslaved to maintain someone else's profit margins. Ambassador Chen was quiet for a long moment, clearly conferring with his superiors through neural link. When he spoke again, his voice carried genuine concern. Your Majesty, you're asking us to abandon principles that predate humanity's entry into galactic civilization. The debt system maintains order. Without it, chaos. Without it, freedom. Lysara moved to the observation port, watching supply ships moving between the orbital stations. Ambassador, your people have grown comfortable thinking of humans as junior partners in galactic affairs. Yesterday, a maintenance worker reminded us that partnership requires mutual respect, and if we refuse, then humanity will discover how well we can manage without partners who view us as expendable labor. The threat hung in the air between them. Both sides knew the potential consequences: economic disruption across multiple sectors, possible military confrontation, the end of an era of cooperative expansion. But beneath it all lay a simpler truth. Sometimes principle mattered more than convenience. I need to consult with the council, Chen said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. Lysara's tone was perfectly diplomatic. Marcus Chen has 7 years to serve his bond. We can wait that long for your answer. As the ambassador left, Torres moved beside her at the observation port. Think they'll agree? Eventually. They don't have much choice. She watched a shuttle depart for Colony 7, carrying food supplies and probably volunteers for the debt intervention program. The question is whether they'll do it gracefully or fight us every step of the way. And if they fight? Lysara thought of a maintenance worker facing 7 years of servitude for the crime of protecting a stranger, of a small alien child growing up free because someone chose to do the right thing, of thousands of volunteers across human space willing to make similar sacrifices. Then they'll learn that humans can be very stubborn when we believe we're right. The response came 18 hours later, delivered through formal diplomatic channels to avoid any appearance of capitulation. The Consortium agreed to immediate negotiations on debt reform, with the understanding that all parties would work toward mutually acceptable solutions while respecting existing obligations. It was diplomatic language for surrender, wrapped in face-saving protocol. 2 months later, Lysara stood once again on the observation deck overlooking Colony 7's main plaza. The same market stalls filled the same spaces, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Alien and human vendors worked side by side, without the undercurrent of fear that had marked her previous visit. Children played in areas that had once held debt enforcement stations. At the center of the plaza, a small memorial had been erected. Not to Marcus Chen. He was still alive and working in the hydroponics facility, but to the principle he had demonstrated. A simple stone marker bearing the words, "Someone needs to." The reforms are working, Torres reported, approaching with the latest statistics. Debt bondage down 80% across human space. Colonial independence movement's quiet. Even the Consortium is reporting improved productivity with voluntary labor. Good. Lysara didn't move from the railing. And Marcus? Still serving his term, but the work assignment modifications are keeping him safe. Word is he's been promoted to senior agricultural consultant. Some kind of revolutionary new growing technique? Lysara smiled. Somehow, that seemed entirely appropriate. Your Majesty, Torres continued, there's something else. Intelligence reports suggest other species are beginning to adopt similar intervention programs. The Altarians have established something called honor bonds for protecting vulnerable populations. The Zephyrians are calling it covenant service, imitation being the sincerest form of flattery. The Consortium isn't pleased. They're calling it a dangerous precedent that threatens economic stability across the galaxy. Lysara finally turned from the railing, preparing to return to the shuttle. Let them call it whatever they want. The precedent was set the moment Marcus Chen decided that someone else's freedom mattered more than his own convenience. As they walked toward the landing platform, she caught sight of a familiar figure in the crowd below. Kessa, now wearing the uniform of colonial security, was training a group of new recruits in crowd management techniques. Her daughter sat nearby, working on what looked like homework in the shade of a fruit stand. A maintenance worker's choice to accept bonded servitude had become a galaxy-wide movement for economic justice. One man's quiet decision to do the right thing had reshaped interstellar law. But more than that, it had reminded humanity that their greatest strength wasn't their technology, or their military might, or their economic power. It was their willingness to sacrifice for principle, to stand up for others regardless of personal cost. The Consortium had ruled through fear, maintaining order by ensuring that resistance was too expensive for most beings to afford. They had forgotten that humans had never been particularly good at calculating the cost of doing what was right. As the royal shuttle lifted away from Colony 7, carrying Lysara toward the next crisis requiring her attention, she reflected on the strange turns that had brought them to this point. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. A debt collector's casual cruelty. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. A queen's decision to bet humanity's future on the principle that everyone deserved better. It had worked, but only because Marcus Chen had been willing to pay a price that couldn't be calculated in credits or political capital. 7 years of his life, freely given to save a stranger and her child. The galaxy was learning that when humans said, "someone needs to," they usually meant themselves.